All right, welcome to Nested Loops. This is Shape Up. We're doing Chapter 4, Find the Elements. Alex has already got his thing presented, so I'll come take over.
Great, thank you very much. So, Jacob, this is chapter 4, Finding the Elements. So, we have the constraints of an appetite, which is what we went over in the last chapter, and the problem that we're solving. So, it's time to get from an idea to the elements of a software solution. So, it's important that we can move fast and cover a lot of different ideas without getting dragged down in this process, right? So yeah, essentially we want to move at the right speed. There's two things that enable us to move at the right speed in finding the elements. First is that we need the right people in the room. So we either need to be alone or with someone who can keep pace, right? Someone you can speak with in shorthand, someone ideally who has the same or similar background knowledge to us. And second, we need to avoid the wrong level of detail in our sketches. So if we start with wireframes, we'll get stuck on details and won't be able to explore as broadly. So our challenge is to be concrete enough to make progress on a solution without getting dragged down into fine details. Right? So we don't want to be working in super high fidelity mockups, getting caught in things, the wrong level of abstraction, things that might not matter necessarily later on that sort of hold us back from making good progress. So we're trying to answer a few different questions in this process. Where in the current system does this new thing, this new feature, whatever it is that we're working on, where does it fit? How do we get to it? What are our key components or interactions? Once we interact, where does that take us? To stay at the right level of detail and capture our thoughts as they come, we work by hand. And working by hand, we use a couple different prototyping techniques, breadboarding and fat marker sketches. So the first one we'll talk about is breadboarding. So a breadboard is an electrical engineering prototype that has all the components and wiring of a real device, but none of the industrial design. So you can see in this image here, it's the difference between deciding to include an indicator light and a turn knob on this left-hand side versus the discussion on what this knob should look like and how far away should it be from the red light, and then should the red light actually be green, or it's just putting in these core elements versus and knowing what the core elements are versus trying to figure out the finer detail of the type of plastic they're going to use for the prototype. Similarly, we can discuss the key components of an interface idea without specifying a particular visual design. So we use a simple shorthand for that. There are three basic things that we're going to draw. We're going to draw places. So these are things that you can navigate to, like screens, dialogues, menus, or pop-up windows. And affordances, these are things that a user can act on, like buttons and fields. And also, they make note that they consider interface copy to be an affordance too, because reading is an act that gives the user information for subsequent actions. And then we're going to draw connection lines. So these show how affordances take the user from place to place. The quote from the book will use words for everything instead of pictures. The important things are the components we're identifying and their connections. They allow us to play out an idea and judge if the sequence of actions serves the use case we're trying to solve. I just thought that was sort of a funny idea for summing up breadboarding. So in the book, they have this invoice example. So we're going to suppose that we have an invoicing tool, and we're planning out a new auto pay feature of this invoicing tool. So we're going to use breadboarding for this example. So first thing is we're going to pick a starting point and say that the customer has landed a place, and we draw it by writing the name of it and underlining it. So that looks like that. So that is our first place, invoice. We know it's a place because we're underlining it. So once we're on the invoice page, we can add a turn on auto pay button. That's an affordance, right? That's an action. So affordances go below the line to indicate that they can be found at that place. So like this. So we have the place invoice, the underline, and then the affordance underneath. And our affordance here is turn on autopay. So that leads to questions, where does this button go? Right? So some place for setting up autopay, it seems like that would be obvious. We don't have to specify whether the new place is a modal or a new page. All we have to do is draw a connection line from the button to the new place. So what that looks like is that. So the connection line obviously is that arrow, so we turn on autopay, and then that brings us to this new place of setup autopay. And yeah, we don't have to specify. We don't even necessarily have to know whether or not setup autopay is just like a modal dialog or an actual new page. As long as we put it up top and put a line, it's fine just to know that it's a place. Right? So now we can start the discussion on what belongs on the autopay screen. So figuring out what to write under each place provokes discussions on what to build. For this example, it is decided that we should ask for credit card details, and they decide that we should include bank logos and have a submit button that leads to a new place, which is the confirm place. So what that looks like is this. So, we can see how this can sort of go on indefinitely. We started invoice, we discussed that we need to turn on autopay, we move over to set up autopay, then we have all of these affordances underneath it, and credit card fields that they can interact with, logos, they click submit. That brings us to the confirm place, which has a thank you message, because copy is also affordance. So they decide that looks good, but did we actually pay the original invoice? I'm trying to answer some questions here. What does enabling autopay actually do, and where might we explain this behavior? So we're starting to have deeper questions and discussions prompted by just words and arrows with breadboarding, right? Luckily, though, since we're using just a lightweight notation and aren't bogged down with wireframes or anything like that, we can quickly jump around. So we can add an option to the setup autopay screen, right? So now it looks like this. Since we're not working with high fidelity mockups here, we're not really, locked down to. It's really fast for us, right, to do this. So essentially, what we added here was on the setup autopay, we added an affordance that just asks if we want to pay all the balance now. So it's good that we have the option to pay balance now, but we're probably complicating the responsibilities of the confirmation screen. So we're going to need to show a receipt if you pay your balance, right? So the question becomes, are we going to include that conditional logic on the confirmation screen to have the confirmation screen show a receipt of the amount that was just paid? And what they decide is to take an entirely different approach. So instead of starting on an invoice, we make autopay an option when making the payment. So in doing that, there's no ambiguity on whether the current amount is being paid or not. So what that looks like is this. So, I think this highlights as well the flexibility, obviously, of breadboarding. Because now, they threw out almost like what they were doing before, and now they're starting on an invoice, which has a pay affordance, and that leads to the pay invoice, which has credit card fields, ACH fields, logos, auto pay in the future as a question, and then they have a submit button that brings them to confirm and has all of their affordances that they need for the confirm page. But that leads to more discussion, which is sort of the point of breadboarding, which is what about after auto pay is enabled? How does the customer turn it off? So in this example that we're using, that is an example from Basecamp itself. The customers in the system didn't have usernames or passwords. So instead they followed, I think it's a tokenized links to pay the invoices one by one. So during the discussion, the team decides that adding password and user flows was too much scope for their appetite. Because obviously it would make sense that turning off autopay features would be connected to users, right? But they had decided that adding those user flows was too much for this project, and they didn't have the appetite for it. So they decided to add a single option to disable autopay in the customer service details page that was already offered to invoicers. So they had this invoicers customers list, and that had a details page. So there they added the turn off auto pay feature instead of creating whole different flows that they didn't want to and didn't have the appetite to take on. So this example shows the level of speed and thinking to aim for during the breadboarding phase. Writing out the flows confronts us with questions we didn't originally think of. It stimulates design ideas without distracting us with visual choices. And once we get to a good place, it's time to define the project more clearly. Right? So we want to get more concrete while still leaving out a huge amount of detail. So essentially, once we're at a spot where we feel like breadboarding has, we've really rounded out our ideas and gone through that process. Essentially, yeah, we want to continue to solidify the project and to, as they say, make things more concrete. But it seems to me like a huge part of the shaping up process is leaving out as much detail for as long as possible to always give the flexibility to change when new questions arise. So what that leads us to is fat marker sketches, right? So sometimes the idea we have in mind is a visual one. Breadboarding would just miss the point because the 2D arrangement of elements is the fundamental problem, right? So we still don't want to waste time on wireframes or unnecessary fidelity, so we use this technique called fat marker sketches. So fat marker sketches are made with such broad strokes that adding details is difficult or impossible. So they suggest that you can use a large tip Sharpie, which is I guess how they used to do it, but now they use iPads with a super wide pen size diameter. And the idea with using such broad strokes that adding details is difficult and impossible is literally that it's so, the sketches are so wide, right? Like the actual pen marks are so wide that adding details is actually hard. It's hard to get in there and add small details, which is what the whole point is, right? So in this small example that they use to show us a bit about fat marker sketching, they have it's a to-do divider, right? So at Basecamp, they had their own to-do tool, and essentially they were adding fake to-dos to their to-do tool to act as a divider, right? So they would have a list of to-dos, and then they had no way to divide it, and they would add like a fake to-do item that would be lines or something that acted as a divider. So they wanted to add a real dividing feature. But they had to work out the implications of what that meant of adding a divider, and they came up with the idea that adding a divider separated the list into loose to-dos above the divider and group to-dos below. So essentially that looked like this. So this is sort of like the idea of the fat marker sketch, right? It's super, super big, and so they have these loose to-do items up top, which are items that are not part of any grouped item, right? So what makes an item grouped is the divider itself. So all the items below that divider are grouped. So then they decided that they can add some affordances within each group. So you click the add button, and that adds a loose to-do item. You click the add button in the grouped one, and that adds a group to-do item. So the fat marker sketch notation is less constraining than breadboards, right? But that also has its own downsides. Essentially, we might get attached to a layout element that we like, even if it's not a core element. And I think that's pretty easy to see. So, in the sense that fat marker sketches are just inherently more visual, right, than just writing text and lines and arrows. So I think the worry is that even though it's so general, still fat marker sketches, that you might get attached to something visually and get bogged down in detail. But they say as long as we try to keep an eye out on that, that it's still far better off than getting stuck in the weeds by creating wireframes too early, right? So, obviously fat marker sketches are super less detailed than wireframes, so it's much harder, even though the sketches are visual, it's still much harder to get caught up in details. And that leads to this whole point that elements are the output, right, of these methods, right? So in both the fat marker sketch and the breadboard example, we end up with clear elements, right? Using these methods enable us to work out the main elements of a solution. So, the whole point of both of these is to work through, your issue, your problems that you're trying to solve, and have these elements as the output, right? And the autopay, the elements are things like, these pages and these affordances, and in the to-dos one, it's things like these grouped lists and these loose lists. I think, sorry. I think that's just an important part, right? Is that's what we're aiming for in doing these sketches, is to get these elements as the output. And the final thing that we also want to do, or that's good for, that's nice about these methods, right, is that it leaves room for designers, right? So later, when it's time to involve a designer, you don't want to have to say, I know I drew it like that, but ignore it, which I think is pretty common for anyone, right? There's always, anyone in this industry's had conversations similar to that, right? So working at the right level of abstraction not only ensures we move at the right speed, but it also leaves important room for creativity in the later stages, right? By leaving details out, the breadboard and fat marker methods give room to designers in subsequent phases of the project. And, this is sort of the theme of the shaping process, right? We're making the project more specific while also leaving lots of space for decisions and choices to be made later. I think that's definitely what I've gotten from it, at least so far. Certainly, is that we're trying to be in each part of the phase. We're trying to leave as much room for detail later on as we learn more, right, and not get bogged down in details too early, so that we can ensure that we're making the right choices. And that's the end of that chapter. But yeah, I liked. I really liked the breadboarding, and I liked the examples that they went through on the breadboarding. I wish that the fat marker sketches had. I think I understand it, but I wish that it had more detail. A more detailed example, almost at the same level of detail that the breadboarding had, because I felt a little wanting on wanting to know more. Like I understand that the whole point is getting it solves the problem that breadboarding can't, because in a sense where you want to be more visual, and that you're still trying to leave out as much detail as possible. I don't know. I just felt like breadboarding was really, really well covered, and fat marker sketches less so, I guess.
So, go ahead. Yeah.
But
So I think what's interesting when I look at the breadboarding is kind of fleshing out the what's.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're gonna work through. And actually, I don't know if anyone besides Diego is familiar with CRC cards. There's an OO technique used by old Agile guys, CRC, class responsibility collaborator cards. So they would use index cards, and it's almost the same thing. So the class is the title. So if you look at invoice, we could actually sort of almost make a CRC card. You'd put an index card at the top. You'd put invoice, and that's the noun. You put the line underneath there. In CRCs, you do the responsibilities. Right? But in this case, it's the affordance. It's close, but not quite. So you have a noun-verb thing, but it's a noun-verb thing. And then, of course, collaborated the cards that you associated. So I want to say that this approach is nearly identical in that you still have the three parts. You have the place, the affordance, and the connection lines, which map to the CRC, the class, the responsibility, which are the affordances, and then the collaborators. right? And the way they do this is they put it on a table or on a wall, and they put the cards. And the big difference is this is how they're actually fleshing out like the back end. It's more typical. It's OO programming. It's so you're starting to realize your classes and objects, of which there's usually a correlation with UI, but not always. And this is more UI focused. So you can see we have a place, which is a web page, which may have one or many objects beneath it, and you have various buttons, which depending on how you implement this thing, have some stuff, but kind of it's more actions, not so much responsibilities, but actions. Right, and so this is real similar to the CRC notion, but I want to say from the UI perspective, which I always felt like what we're trying to work out here is the flows. You see how they crossed out the auto pay here and they moved it here. So it's part light so that we can make these changes easily. So this seems like this is always a really good real-time thing. Like, I think what would be cool is for maybe one of us to find a pet idea and just tape us for 30 minutes going through and see what the beginning picture was versus the end picture. I think that would be a cool exercise to possibly do, and the more practice you get, it better. But you can sort of see. But again, the difference here, and also the difference from CRC, is the focus is really from here, from the UI, which is really kind of like, what is the user experience? So they were fleshing out, oh, how do I turn off autopay? Oh, let's go back and figure this out. We could put it here. Oh, no, it doesn't work. Right? Yeah. It's light away, but it's focusing on the what from the UI perspective. And then the fat marker, as far as I know, there's another concept with a fat marker. Bob Martin made a statement, of course, which is volatile, like a lot of things. He says something like, all the UML you need to know should fit on a napkin. And again, UML is something similar to class responsibility. It's about drawing object diagrams. And actually, on that note, of like the 13 diagrams of UML, he only thinks that they're really useful, and I kind of agree with him, but it's a different story. But his whole point is, with the napkin drawing, is putting in as much detail as you need to work out the details programming, because like a lot of these things, if you guess up front, you often guess wrong. And that's what these lightweight things are. Let's focus on the essential things and work out the details. And again, this process is leave room for designers.
Right.
Whereas CRC is leave room for programmers. I have a bank teller, or I have like a bank account, and it has a deposit and withdrawals and auto, right? So I've got the noun, I got the responsibilities, but these details we leave to the programmer. So we grab the important thing, and arguably like bread boxing, we map out the important cases, possibly edge cases as we come out. We map them out and we leave the detail to the programmer. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of the old Agile OO kind of approach applied from the UI front end, which ultimately I go, that makes a difference. You get these, when I complain, I was in this study group, was it the N3st study group, I was talking about, you use, it's like PowerPoint, old PowerPoint versus old Keynote. They did the same things, but Keynote was way better. Like someone worked the UI of, we can add this one, but in Keynote, it's 2 buttons and it looks great, and PowerPoint is 17 buttons and it still looks like Microsoft. Right? And so doing the, I think the bread boxing from the perspective of the experience, I think, gets you a better experience. But back to the fat marker thing. As far as I can tell, this is forcing you to do napkin wireframes. Where I think the thing with the napkin is you can't be super detailed on the napkin, because a napkin is a bendly, crumbly thing, and you can barely draw those lines with your pencil on it. Right, where you're not able to focus on these details that otherwise would distract us. Which also goes back to, I think, the original point is we're still at a state where we're not even at the betting table. Like the previous chapter is, let's see if we can figure out what part of this problem is something we can do in one of the big or small, the batch cycle or the big cycle. So chapter 3 before we even start working, let's prune down. Let's get to the real thing. Let's not make an entire calendar when all we need to do is figure out what the free space was.
Right.
Right. And then now we're here going, okay, so how should this look? What are the elements that we should build? And then he said something in the previous chapter about what the difference between an estimate starts with a number and ends with the design, and then the appetite is.
Yeah.
Or no, the appetite's the number, ends with the design, and runs the design. I forgot. But it's kind of reverse. But I guess it's important. That distinction is kind of important. If you remember what it was, because it is flipped of how we normally do estimates. I just lost my train of thought. So I was just talking about.
I think all of it is like let's design something we can build in the time that is valuable, that is like a solid as a solution, solid like a solution for the customer, solution for technically, which is like in the next chapter, and I really lost my train of my thought. Oh, damn it. But yeah, pretty much this constraint is the minimum amount of things without feature creep. Right? Let's keep feature creep to a minimum, like all the things there. What is this? I'm getting a phone call without anything.
I've seen those. Almost guaranteed to be spam.
Can you guys see it?
Yeah, I've gotten those.
That's weird. All right.
Yes.
I came in. Oh, I came in answer, so it's okay.
You can't block it because there's no number to block.
I cannot answer, or I cannot hang up.
Yeah. All right, but yeah. So we're in the case where I do like how they're trying to narrow, not just narrow and focus. Like the previous one is like, okay, what is the real point? Because we always want to throw these features. So yeah, let's do this. And this is this nebulous thing that can be huge in scope and may or may not even be what the customer wants. Like in some cases, I feel some of this process is similar in spirit to MVP. What's the minimum viable product we should build? Let us distill the essence that we can throw it out and see whether they like it or not.
Right.
There's at this part of the book, there's less whether they like it or not. It's what we think they like it or not. Which ultimately, I guess, is how Apple kind of worked anyways. And they were working well. I mean, I think, I bet Apple doesn't care what the hell they want. They're going to give you crappy keypads that no one wants and this stupid touch bar. While other people are letting you touch the screen and do cool stuff. So, all right, yeah, so that's where this is. The next one is about the rabbit holes. I thought, let me see if I can do this. I thought this would be better if we could do exercises. And so I'm going to see if I can. Actually, I'm not sharing these. So
Chapter would be better, or the next one?
I'm going to try a little thing, an experiment, if I can. So if I want to change the presenter.
Let me start the one.
A window. I'll let you take over. Okay, I'm going to take over as the presenter, and I want this one. Okay, I'm going to adjust this. Tell me, can you see this empty buffer? I'm trying to size it. I'm trying to share one of my app windows. Do you see? What do you guys see from me?
Let's see, Emacs up right now.
Okay, so I thought, looking at this, I thought it might be fun to write like a React app that is a breadboard thing.
You
know what I mean? And so I thought we could do one too. I don't know though. It's like so what would that look? So maybe we could very meta circular here. what's breadboard, the breadboard app or something like that, right? And so
Yeah.
I guess what we have the I guess I don't know, the main screen. So we can see is that big enough? Do I need to raise the phone up?
I think it's fine. I can see.
Yeah, and then we have the line, and then we might have what? So that's our object. What's our affordance? We would have like a new what do we call those elements in the bread box? He didn't name it. New place,
Affordances.
right? We'd have a new place. We would have a to make a new element. We'd want to be able to maybe delete, or is that the right click?
Oh, okay. So we're on this main screen. So we have an
So
affordance
that's
that
my
will.
main screen, and then the affordance is we have a new place button.
Okay. So yeah, new place.
And then I can click there, and then I have what? Then I guess the somewhere I have like a new place. Oh, I can do fonts. Yes. Oh, I'm doing some weird thing. Okay. New place. It's like, so you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to do the exercise with something. I don't know how well I'm doing it, and of course I'm doing it all on the fly. And
Yeah.
we got it.
Okay. So yeah, new place, and then there'd be like a new affordance, right?
I would assume you just type, click and type.
You type.
So there would be an affordance area, I guess. Affordance area. Well, I think you would just type. And you can. When I look at this, I'm starting to already feel that I want to do the fat marker thing,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know how I would do in Emacs. Now in Emacs, what I can do is I can drag and draw a line. So this whole thing that goes from that affordance to this one. So
That's cool.
I can do real time ASCII drawing. So I can breadboard in Emacs.
I didn't know that. Cool.
Most people don't. Yeah, so I can draw that one, and but I don't know how. I don't know. Interestingly, so Emacs I just print artist mode, so I can do all these things in ASCII art. Polyline. I suppose somewhere I could probably make a setting of how fat the lines are, but being ASCII, it's probably something. So I don't think I would try. Or at least not without experimenting. But all right, so we have an affordance area. I figure we would type, and then we need a way to draw the line. How do we pop out of affordance? New connector? Maybe?
Yeah, I guess so. And that would just be like a tool that just made it so you could just draw, right? Draw like a line
from one place to another place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh, this would be really cool if we could do an exercise of each, of course, without having prepared one. You get what you get. Oh, look, affordance is not a word that Emacs understands. Okay, so actually it's kind of simple. Isn't that it? I can draw lines, I can make stuff, we're done. We're ready for the fat marker picture.
Yeah, right, because then it's just...
that was much less impactful. I thought, oh, this would be a cool example. I'll use breadboard to make a breadboarding tool. And I don't know if this is even a good breadboard, but it's an idea. If anyone has an idea of a project, we could change that. So if anyone has an idea, anyone got a tech idea, anything that we can declassify and pull from work and try and breadboard out?
I don't know how big of an idea you want it.
I don't know. I just thought I just kind of want to play around with the methodology, but I needed something to do, and the breadboard ended up being like 2 boxes. So.
Well, I think I get. I don't know.
right? I always feel with the guys that really get good at whatever it is they're learning is they read the book and then the exercise in the book, they do all the exercises.
Okay.
And that makes them 96% better than everyone else that might even buy the book. And they go, oh, if we just did the exercises, we'd be good. So if we can't think of any ideas, we can wrap. So I don't know if we wrap here if you want to start the new one. And for the fat marker, I guess if it's a drawing tool, I don't know what I'd fat marker either. I guess we could fat marker the. I don't know. Alex, you have anything to draw on? You have something that you could do a fat marker simulation?
I have Sketch, but I'm not sure how I would do with that marker simulation. Okay, we'll see.
I mean, for the idea, you can use it because anything will be like kind of big, right?
Yeah, you want a fat marker. I'm just figuring out.
This is like a notification center, right?
Mm-hmm.
It will be just like a small component inside of an app.
Mm-hmm.
So generally you have a list of the people that you can contact, but also you have an area where you have all the conversation, all the notifications.
All right, let's think about that. So I have an area, and you said you had a list. Where does that go? Left, right? You have a list of something. And what's the first list? You were describing. And then you have another thing. So I'm trying to fill out Diego's thing, but I don't know what details he's saying. So, I have all that empty space on the right, which I feel is not. It's not important for the fact.
I cannot hear that.
Yeah, I was trying to draw what you just said. I don't know if I
Well,
an accurate thing.
let me look. So, generally, I'm opening up Messenger from Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have they kind of have like a different tabs for what the list of the people you can message, and a tab for the people you're already messaging.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how you would do a tab in what you're doing.
I gotta figure out.
I mean, I think you picked like a very rudimentary tool.
Let's go back to the thing. So we're talking Messenger, right? And then you want a little tab, which is something like that. And then this is already talking. And we have another tab, which is something like good talk to you.
Contacts.
Down there we have should I put a bullet in there or something
Right.
right? Mm-hmm. And then we switch things and you get a different thing. I guess I could draw another contact. I need some way of signifying that each tab I have.
Yeah. Instead of closing the already, you close the contact. And then go all the way past it. There you go. And the way it looks like you're on the already, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It's probably easier with the iPad thing.
Yeah.
or a Sharpie.
Yeah. So
That's why the fair marker.
Mhm.
You want to just have a rough idea of what it's going to look like, just like the position.
mhm.
Like it's kind of like when they teach design and layout, they make you do like you get a piece of paper, fold it like in 8 pieces, and then you do thumbnails, right? And
I
and
realize
the
on
reason why
broadcast, even though
you
I'm
can-
presenting, I'm not showing
and
this.
the reason why you do like a thumbnail of it is because you cannot put a lot of details in a thumbnail.
Mhm.
So you'll draw like the layout, and you just do like lines instead of writing stuff. And the line represent like with different marker size, like a fine type, big type, whatever. And that way you can tell if the layout works, right? And I think this is kind of the same thing. You do that, and you can start looking, well, in design, not in design the software, but like when you do like graphic design, you figure out like empty spaces, and, playing with the white spaces and all that kind of stuff, negative spaces. Also, you look at how much is too much, right? How much stuff is too much on the screen or on the page. And also, like, by doing this, it's very, very quick. How long does it take you to fill out this much paper? Like you do it like in a very few strokes. I think that's kind of like the idea. Like they go with, again, it's like the whole process goes like from the big idea, narrow it down. But like if you go for the big idea with lots of details all around it, you come with a project that takes years to do. But if you go big idea with the biggest marker, you cannot put that much stuff in it. And it's all about like pruning. And not because I've been doing a lot of landscaping this weekend, but it's actually there used to be a developer from RubyConf. He did a lot of presentation. Like he considered himself a code gardener. Like he prunes code. Like he just like snip and until like the code is shaped in a nice way. They're doing pretty much the same thing, but with design features and functionality, right? Like anything that is not needed is a nice to have, is out of the window or scheduled for a later time.
Yeah, no, pruning. I like it. I think an exercise. If anyone figures out something, the bread box or thing in between now, we could probably do like a show and tell in the beginning. I also want to apologize. Anyone who watches this on YouTube, I shared the screen with the meetup, but it didn't go on the YouTube thing until the end. So we'll be talking to nothing, unfortunately. So I feel bad people are confused. Oops.
Okay, so if you want, I have something similar to this that I did in college for one of our projects.
Okay.
So I've got this notebook. And so like one of our projects, we were making like a video website. And so I don't know if you can see, but you can see like I drew like little layouts of the page here. Right. And so it's kind of just like really basic. Let's see if I can find some more. And so the idea was just to kind of just get like a basic layout for the page and like not really like have a lot of detail. That sort of just show kind of what should be on the page, where the layout, where the different like containers are supposed to be. Right? And so that was, I think, pretty helpful for me, figuring out how to design all the web pages. So you can see, so yeah, so like this one here is the search page. So you can see here's search results, and then over there like filters. But yeah, so they're just like really, really small. So I didn't have like a huge marker, so instead I just did it like really small. So
Yeah, I think that's similar, right? Almost, right? Like doing it.
it's kind of like what Diego was saying about somebody else do it really
Yeah.
small.
Right. Like one, as long as it limits like what, as long as it limits what you can do, like how much detail you can add. And I think that's really good. If you're looking at that, might be at least.
I mean, I think a lot of it's just enough. Just enough to find the stuff that we want and not make it easy for you to get off track.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's the big marker or the tiny drawing, it's like you can only get so much in there. If you've ever tried to have a tech discussion on Twitter, it feels like that, but it's exacerbated. I can't explain this thing in less than 2 tweets, and I start to lose my mind. So something like that. Arguably, that's why they limit your abstracts when you do like a call for proposal thing on conferences. Which ultimately, I guess it's good because some people are too verbose, but I would also venture if you're trying to describe something innovative, it's not enough words. Because by definition, if it doesn't exist, I can't say it's just like this. It's not innovative. If I can just say it's just like that, that's not innovation. Oh, it's just like Facebook. Innovation, it's Facebook for gardeners. This is this new thing. So anyway, that's my own topic. All right, I think we obviously at this point we don't have room for 5. So anyone has anything else to add? Now's the time. Alexis, any thoughts as our designer that we're leaving more room for?
Yeah, I thought these were like interesting ideas, like as alternatives to wireframes, right? So when I sketch, I tend to get carried away with details. So yeah, I can try out some of these things, like maybe the bread boxing, like just the words. I want to try some of these things when we get into updating account settings and like subscription flows. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
Well, there's a time to go crazy on details, of which at this step of shape up is not the right time.
Yeah, that's the other thing I want to say is like sometimes it's easier to convey certain things, like when you get to the actual detailed portion of things, like you just have to find the right time for everything, I guess.
Yeah. So again, I was thinking bread boxing is making sure you have the right parts, and I want to say the fat mark is more like the right approach, which would use the parts from the other one. Sometimes apparently the way they could just jump to it. But what I'm saying, it's like bread boxing is specifically made for like almost no UI hints except for what the affordances are to make sure you do the right things. But once you start drawing the picture, then you're trying to do it in the right way.
To the point, like at the level of detail, as Alexis just said, is the right level of detail for the current level or phase of development, right? Yeah. As you're shaping it, you don't have that much details, and then as you get in the risk assessment, which is the next session, you go into more details and you try to figure out how everything's gonna work. It's still sketchy. Like you try to get from the big idea to something that's very narrow and doable. There's something about it in general that makes me think that it's a good process. It's a very good process, but it's probably not for every team.
Yes.
Because you need a very functional team, meaning people that are like they can take criticism in a good way, people that can provide criticism in a good way, You need to have a respect for your peers and their opinion. Like for like somebody gives you an opinion, but like, oh, the guy is an idiot anyway. I'm not going to listen to him. Not have the kind of stuff, right? So it is for like a highly functional team.
So that kind of process is like something like the UI UX team when we meet. It's sort of like a design critique where you assess. Is this element good? Is this in or out? That type of thing. Yeah. If you can do that early on and get all these ideas going and have room for innovation like that can be a cool process.
Yeah, no, I think Alexa's idea using this early on for like accounts page redesign. Redbox will allow you to flesh out the essential parts and the element.
And if we think of an ops sector project, it could be a technique we can use for that.
Yeah, I think ops sector we could do the whole thing, but I think certainly parts. I think that this pruning, the shaping part of pruning, or the pruning part of shaping, I think is useful. And then if we can magically get those magic numbers, like what can we do in 6 weeks and whatever, that would make management really happy too. We could adjust this, but I definitely think getting the right elements at the right step, I think, would be useful across the board. All right, so if there's nothing else, I guess it's coming on 3 minutes. It's about time to wrap. So thank you. Diego is going to do chapter 5 next week. Not next week, next session. So thank you for coming and playing. If anyone does any breadboarding or fat markering at home, you can show and tell at the beginning of next session. What to think about it. I'll think about it. All right. Cool. Thank you. Enjoy.